counterintuitive, but that is one of the ways taxes influence incentives. And if I can create a tax code that provides the right kind of incentives, we'll get the kind of activity that we need to see the economy flourish.
Welcome to Stewardology, a podcast where two worlds collide. In this show, financial advisor Tim Russell and Pastor Drew Gysi are joined by me, producer Tyler Rutherford, to explore the intersection of financial stewardship and theology. Their unique perspectives help Christians and churches understand and apply a biblical framework for everyday financial decisions so Christians everywhere can grow in their walk with Christ through biblical stewardship. Before we get started, we just wanted you to know that the topics discussed in this podcast are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific investment advice or recommendations. Investment and investment strategies involve risk, including the potential loss of principal, and past performance is not a guarantee of future results. Securities and advisory services are offered through Genius Wealth Management, member FINRA, and SIPC. Without further ado, here are your hosts, Tim Russell, Drew Gysi, and Tyler Rutherford. Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Stewardology Podcast. I'm Tyler, and I'm here with my co-host, Tim Russell.
Welcome. Good to be here.
And Drew Gysi.
Hey, good to be back again.
Before we get into the episode today, if you have listened to this podcast for a while, we just want to thank you for tuning in. Make sure you're subscribing, leaving a like and a review of 5 stars. All that stuff helps us just break through the algorithm a little bit more and reach new ears. It's super helpful so that we can have exciting conversations like the one we're having today. Taxes.
Oh, yay.
Taxes.
Well, actually, I actually like this topic because it's the science of taxation, how cutting taxes can actually raise revenue.
I'm all in. Let's do it.
It's like contradictory in a sense. A lot of people think, oh, if I'm taxed more, the government's making more and they must be making more money. Like, yay, right? Is that a good thing? But what we're saying here, what we're offering is that cutting taxes can actually raise revenue.
Different ways in which certain kinds of taxes being cut can actually raise revenue, both in direct revenue and some indirect revenue that we'll get into today.
It sounds counterintuitive, but economics shows that happens more often than you think. And if there's less taxes, guess what you can do with the resources God has entrusted to you? You can give it
better.
You can steward it better. You can share it. You have more control over those resources. And that's what we're all about. Because remember, it's God's money, it's God's resources that we are entrusted to manage. So today on Stewardology, the science of taxes. So Tim, take us into this.
All right. So does anyone remember the lesson, economics in one lesson? What was the lesson?
You have to examine the second, third, and fourth order of effects, and it can't just be for one group of people that you prioritize.
It's all groups.
Yeah. So Henry Hazlitt in his Economics in One Lesson, again, have you read it yet? Have you purchased it? Is it in your Amazon cart? If you hit buy now, it's good. Okay?
Is it under your pillow?
Look, it doesn't work through osmosis. You actually have to read it. So he makes a point that the study of economics is summed up in this one thing. Every policy must be looked at not just how it favors one group, but how it affects all the groups. Mm-hmm. And that it's not just the first impact, but second, third, fourth order impacts, as you said. That is what economics is demonstrating. Actually, a true, accurate demonstration of economics is not just how it impacts one person. So when we talk about taxes, there are a number of things that I think we need to recognize. First of all, taxes are a necessary part in the key functions of a government. It can and is right for a government to tax its population only to provide those necessary services for the existence of that government and the flourishing of its people. That can include for roads, that can include for critical services, for the administration, the wise and careful administration of that government. It can include for the protection of its people. Taxes are not evil.
Yeah, and there's many ways that taxes can be employed, but Romans Chapter 13, verses 6 through 7 says, "For because of this you also pay taxes, for the authorities are ministers of God, attending to this very thing. Pay to all what is owed to them, taxes to whom taxes are owed, revenue to whom revenue is owed, respect to whom respect is owed, and honor to whom honor is owed." So taxes are scriptural. They're in the Bible. Yes, we like to poke fun at the bear and say we don't like to pay taxes, but the reality is it is our charge. We should pay what is owed. But we also like to add on probably not a penny more.
It is in the Greek subscript. It says
good.
Render under Caesar
One of the Greek
what
variants.
is Caesar's, but in the Greek subscript, it's not a penny more.
Tiny, tiny.
So
little
it's
text.
very, very tiny text in there. Very tiny.
All right, so often you'll hear criticism of a concept called trickle-down economics. And trickle-down economics, if I'm going to summarize it in maybe a sentence or two, it's that when you cut taxes or tax rates across the whole, and business taxes are lower and taxes on the wealthy are lower, that there's more revenue inside the country kept in the hands of individual consumers, which means that they will consume more. They will be a better capital allocator than the government, which will result in a different set of choices and incentives to purchase products or to invest that capital in a way that's more effective than the government use of that capital, which creates more business growth, potentially more tax revenues, more human flourishing. It's the idea. Now, trickle-down economics does get a very bad rap, right? This is where we saw that when Ronald Reagan changed the tax code, this is one of the key elements that he did to juice our economy, was we were coming out of a period of time where we had really high regulations and really draconian financial controls and requirements on the government, higher taxes. This is the period where we had super high interest rates and we had really expensive oil. And it was not uncommon to see double-digit interest rates in a savings account. It was kind of wild back then. Now, the economy had ground to a near halt. The economic output of the country had declined substantially. And when Ronald Reagan came in, he popularized the idea that we got to fix the money supply. So we reduced the interest rates through the Volcker Fed. We reduced the interest rates down to a safe and wise level. We lowered the tax rates. At the one point, the tax rate was, I think, up to like 80% or 90% at the top rate, with so many loopholes you could drive a bus through. So it was a really ineffective tax code. Simplified the tax code, lowered the tax rates, and the economy started rolling again. Interest rates went down. Home ownership became easier to afford. It actually became better where businesses were able to produce more, open more locations, create more jobs, create more payrolls, more people paying taxes. And guess what we saw? Tax receipts went up in spite of the fact that tax rates went down. All of that is a study of how incentives force or encourage certain kinds of actions. Taxes are a form of incentive. You incentivize or you decentivize certain kinds of actions. This is why fundamentally socialism and communism doesn't work. Because if you tax so highly those individuals who take risk and who create capital, who create jobs, and you decentivize them from taking risk, from creating capital, from creating jobs, what are you going to get? You're going to get what your tax code incentivizes: less growth, less revenue, less wealth, less human flourishing across the board. So we can cut tax rates and we can see tax revenues possibly increase. I'll give you one direct example of a way in which we could cut a certain tax and possibly see a substantial amount of tax revenue increase. Okay. So we're all familiar with something called capital gains taxes. Now, let me explain how this works in super easy English phrases. Number one, the way the tax code works is if you buy an asset, this is with after-tax dollars. Drew, you're working, you're making a good income here. You take that income and you go out and you buy a stock. That stock you buy for $5 a share. Now, you're a really good investor, and over the course of 5 years, $5 becomes $50.
I'm a good investor.
You sell the stock at $50. You don't have to pay taxes on $50, right? Because the $5 was taxed already. You got it through payroll taxes. So the government doesn't require you to pay on the $5. That, by the way, is called your cost basis. Mm-hmm. It's the amount of money you've already paid taxes on. The amount that's the $45, that's the growth. If you sold, you would pay capital gains tax on the growth. Now, under our current code, we have two forms of capital gains. We have short-term and long-term capital gains. Short-term's less than a year. Long-term, a year more. And the rates are different. Short-term rates are taxed as ordinary income at your highest marginal bracket. Ouch. Long-term is taxed at 15% or lower. So at a lower cost for you. Here's the problem. In our code, and I think this is actually a good thing, in our tax code, we have a provision that if you die with a capital gain asset, your heirs receive a step up in basis at the date of your death and can sell that asset at that time and pay zero capital gain. So Drew, God forbid, you bought it at 5, you die when it's at 50. Your wife or your kids could inherit those shares and sell them right away at 50 and pay zero capital gain. Would you rather pay 15% capital gain or 0% capital gain?
Well, I'm not paying either if I'm dead.
Correct.
But
you're right.
I'm going to pay.
But which would you rather be paid?
Zero.
Zero.
Simple math.
So you're going to hold on to stock or real estate or some other capital gain type asset longer than perhaps you otherwise would in order to get the zero rate, because we're incentivizing holding the asset longer. And I'm not arguing that this zero capital gains at death is a bad thing. In fact, I think it's fundamentally a good thing, but it does create an incentive to inefficiently hold an asset for longer than you otherwise would. What if we had something called a super long-term capital gain? What if you held it for 5 years or more, we dropped the tax code or the tax rate from 15% to say 5%? Well, hold on. Relative to 15, I would be okay with paying 5%. So I bet that there's a lot of real estate that would trade hands at 5% tax that's not trading hands at 15% tax. And that capital will be better utilized. The resource will be better utilized. There will be more supply of housing come to the market because we have individuals who are holding on to real estate rentals or a vacation home that they don't use and they don't want to sell because they don't want to have the capital gain and they'd rather have a zero gain. Well, if I can get the capital and only pay a little bit of taxes, I would be willing to do that. This is, in my mind, a phenomenal it's a no-duh kind of a tax cut. If you create this environment, we'll actually create more tax revenue. We are exchanging 0% tax for 5% tax. Mm-hmm. That's better for the country, and frankly, it's better for everyone in the economy to have the more efficient utilization of those resources if we have that super long-term rate. Now, I'm not God. I'm not the king of the world. I'm not the president, and I can't enact that. So, hey, my politician friends, let's get this going. I'm not the one who came up with the idea. I heard it from another financial advisor, and I think it's brilliant.
So don't vote for Tim. He's not running for office right now.
Yeah. Well, I don't know that I do a great job at it, but I do think it's a good idea.
Oh, sounds
I
like
think it'd be a really great idea, and it would increase tax revenues. It's counterintuitive, but that is one of the ways taxes influence incentives. And if I can create a tax code that provides the right kind of incentives, we'll get the kind of activity that we need to see the economy flourish.
And Tim, that just makes total sense because right now we're operating for that long term. It's a zero tax, but if we can, and people are fearing to sell because we're going to get hammered. But if we can reduce that down, I mean, much more palatable at 5%. Let's do the 5%. Let's make that happen. I agree. Things are going to move and move better, faster, and smoother, and people will be incentivized to hold on for a period of time, but then at a certain time say, time to let go.
Yeah, so by decreasing the capital gains tax, you're actually incentivizing a higher velocity of money, which would create more tax receipts because things are changing hands more frequently and generate more revenue.
And it puts more money into the hands of the consumer also, along with more money into the hands of the government.
Yeah.
I mean, come on, let's just use common sense
Hooray.
here. What was it?
Honestly, if I were king of the world, I would do away with capital gains taxes, and I would go to a flat tax
Vote for
code.
Tim. Vote for Tim.
But we're dealing with the realities, the present economic realities. That's not a present economic reality, nor do I think it would be responsible to necessarily do that while we have such a significant federal debt load. As a nation, we have to dig ourselves out of that debt load. My recommendation for how to do that would be to substantially cut the size of government. Right now, government is way too much the share of GDP. If we cut that down and get all of those employees into the private sector, they'll be paid better and the economy itself will do better. There'll be more tax revenue and there will be even more economic growth with a better allocation of those resources and those individuals. And then with that revenue, we would then be paying down and retiring debt because we cannot be carrying on this debt continually. That means we have to look very hard at our entitlement programs. And this goes back to the very first episode in the series. Was Jesus a socialist? No, he wasn't a socialist, but we still do care about the poor. The problem is that so many of our entitlement programs are taxpayer funded and inefficient and frankly don't solve the long-term problem. It creates more of a long-term problem because it keeps people trapped in the welfare system and enslaved to the welfare system and does not give them the ability to be productive members of society. That's why minimum wage laws need to be abolished. That's why rent controls need to be abolished. That's why we need to get away from tariffs. We need to get to a freer market so that we can get rid of our debt and we can have a more just and profitable and successful organization with the flourishing of all people. The difference is that capitalism is going to create some significant winners, but everyone's going to do better. You will have the trillionaire and the billionaire class. They are going to exist. But with that, you'll also have the quality of life of those on the lower end of the asset and income spectrum have a better quality of life than without it. Capitalism creates more human flourishing, and cutting taxes and reducing the size of the government is a fundamentally critical part of that process.
So we're talking about the science of taxes, and we had a great example just now about the capital gains tax and how a tweak could really do some flourishing. Let's talk about this other thing, this elephant in the room with taxes, about corporate taxes. So, and I know, Tim, you've got some strong opinions about this also.
I think we all should have strong opinions about this.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. Corporations don't pay taxes. Remember when we talked about tariffs and we said that Drew, you're the manufacturer of the good, I'm the reseller of that good, and Tyler is the end buyer of that good? That whole scenario, Tyler pays the tariff.
Yep.
Even though you technically pay it, you pass it along to me, I pass it along to Tyler, Tyler pays it. That is the same with taxes. Remember what I said. The cost of producing the good or the service is always borne by the price of the good or the service. Whatever it costs to manufacture and produce it is always going to be passed along to the end user, the buyer of the product or the service. And if we increase minimum wages, for example, if we increase wages are a substantial part of that. If we increase taxes are a substantial part. All of that is passed along in the price of the product. You are not going to produce a product that you can't afford to sell. You're not going to sell a product for less than it costs to produce. In fact, you're not going to sell it for the same cost of what it costs to produce.
I need a profit.
You need a profit. Profits are good. We should probably have an episode that talks about, are profits good or is this profiteering? I think that's an interesting topic that probably is worth discussing. But profits are fundamentally a good thing. And you are not going to just bear the cost of the tax as a corporation. You're going to pass it on to me. And in turn, I'm going to pass it on to Tyler.
Yes, who pays the corporate tax? It's not the corporation, it's the consumer.
So if we abolish corporate taxes, we lower cost of goods and services across the nation. Well, hold on. Those evil capitalists will simply keep that extra profit. It will make them more profitable. Okay, in some respects, that's true. But remember, this is a capitalistic society, which involves competition. Mm-hmm. And when the cost of delivering a good or service goes down, somebody's going to lower prices to get more share of or volume of sales, share of wallet. And when that happens, it's better for all consumers. Not to mention, even if there is a keeping of some profits, some of those profits still get sent through the economy far more efficiently than government spending those dollars. So we make it better for the end user, the Tylers of the world who buy the products and services because the product cost should be reduced with good competition. And it makes overall tax revenues then potentially increase because we're going to have more potential sales volume. Mm-hmm. Because price, demand, supply and demand, price and demand are very directly connected. If prices go down, the demand for those things go up. This is the same thing that happens with rent control. When the price of a good goes down, the demand for that good outpaces its supply. But if we still have a profit motive and we see that the demand is greater than the supply, natural market forces will fill the need in order to fit that profit goal and profit motive. The profit motive is a good thing for all humanity and all society. That's what makes capitalism work and communism fail everywhere it's attempted.
When there's surplus too, you have to remember the Good Samaritan was able to be generous to the man on the road because he had surplus, he had room, he had margin, right? He had resources to be able to pour in and help him. And imagine what life would look like for you if you had more of your resources under your control. You have more margin, right? All these things are good things. More profit equals more generosity. At the end of the day, the more you can bring in and the lower your expense line is, the more margin you have, the more generous you can be. And think about all the kingdom impact you can have with a little bit more margin, a little bit more generosity.
Oh man, it's so substantial, and the downstream impacts are huge, mm-hmm. Absolutely massive.
So here's a popular one, Tim. I've seen a lot of news theory on this topic, but can you eliminate the income tax?
In the short term, no. In the long term, yes.
Okay, next topic.
In the short term, okay, maybe we rephrase it this way. If the government was the right size, we probably could, but we also have to recognize that part of the share, the percentage of our budget that goes towards debt servicing is way too high.
Yeah.
So the amount of a revenue that we make is not enough. We're running budget deficits every year. So if we cut back our spending, I still think we need the same amount of revenue. We just need to start retiring some of that debt. We're in the same family financial situation where you've got too much debt that's hurting your quality of living. Remember, debt always finances the future to pay for the present. It always results in a lower standard of living. That is fundamentally true, except here in the government, we just forget about that lower standard of living. We say we're just going to keep on borrowing and raising our credit limit because we have control over our credit limit. That is a fundamental problem with our government. So no, I don't think we can abolish the income tax now. I'd love to be proven wrong. I think we need to cut back the size of our government, reduce the bloat, get rid of all of the fraud. And I think we'll find it, we're better able to afford to kind of live on the income that we have right now, pay down the debt, and it'll be better. One of the ways that people talk about getting rid of the income tax would be to go to a VAT tax, a value added tax. This is common in many European countries and frankly countries all around the world. The difference between an income tax and a VAT tax is a VAT tax is a consumption tax. It is all based on what you consume, what you purchase. It taxes everything. The difference is it's at a theoretically lower rate because it impacts all transactions. Every transaction would have a VAT tax applied, which means that you could buy a good, and remember that good is full of all kinds of other inputs, whether it's a food item, you're buying a cookie, and there's wheat, and there's flour, wheat and flour are the same thing. Wheat, and there's sugar, and there's like chocolate chips, and there's all these other ingredients that go into a cookie. You can see how many times I make cookies here. And the VAT tax would apply to each transaction going into the product, which makes it look like a potentially small cost, but overall, because it impacts all the inputs going into the product, the VAT tax could be really huge and the revenues to the government could be massive, which I don't like because I don't want a big government. I want a small government that encourages and incentivizes human freedom. So I would prefer that we avoid the European VAT model. I don't think that at the end of the day, it's a good thing. I will say one thing, however. One of the benefits is when you go to the grocery store or any store in Europe and you see the price, that's the price because the VAT tax is included. When you Americans, I should say, when Europeans come to America, they get so frustrated because they get these things, they put them in their cart, they buy them, and all of a sudden there's this 6% added on top of it. We're used to it. We're Americans. It's so uncommon overseas. So I kind of like the simplicity, like it's just one price. I just don't like the tax rate. And I don't like how it creates such a big government.
There are some states in the U.S. that have abolished their state income tax, but I believe they make up for it in other ways, like maybe a higher sales tax.
Sales tax,
and
real estate taxes.
Yeah. It's crazy. Yeah, I'm curious to look into that further, see how that works out. So we've kind of touched the surface, but as Americans, we pay a lot of taxes.
We do.
Federal, state, local, sales tax. PA, we have a gas tax that is unbelievably high. Real estate taxes, school taxes, per capita taxes. Am I missing any?
I think there was a tax on top of tax.
But
and if you're a business owner, there are all these added taxes on top of that. I just got an email from the Amity Township that says that I'm late in filing for my annual business license. Like, I need a license to run a business? You communists. I'm sorry. Hope they're not watching this episode.
Would you pay that? I think we would like to get a paycheck next week.
Yeah.
I'll
take care of it. Don't worry.
Thank you, brother.
I'm ruffling my feathers over here about taxes.
But it's interesting. As Americans, we've become very accustomed to this idea that our dollar is just taxed over and over and over again. And I'll be honest, that kind of ruffles the feathers a little bit, you know? You're taxed heavily before you even get your paycheck, and then you're taxed every time you spend $1. It's just, there's so many layers to it. And what do we see as a result? Maybe we see a government that's a little bit bloated and inefficient, or a lot of it bloated and inefficient. Yeah. So I don't know. I'd be curious to see this conversation played out someday. Maybe we can get the right people in place to do that. Reduce the taxes, right?
That's right. Cut it back.
You had some thoughts from Thomas Sowell that you wanted to share in regard to this conversation.
I've mentioned every episode, the last couple here. Thomas Sowell is an absolute treasure, and I would highly encourage you to look up and read anything that Thomas Sowell has written, and he's written a lot. What I think is so interesting is he helps us understand how demographics and statistics can often be misleading. So they talk about income disparities and how income disparities are such a bad thing. And Thomas Sowell is so wise to point out, hold on, you are not your present income, nor are you your past income, nor are you your future income. We think of income statuses and people in different income statuses as fixed realities. You are always at minimum wage. No, you're not. Who's at minimum wage? Only kids. Only kids who are starting out, who are trying to learn how to create value in this farm. Not a lot of people actually earn minimum wages. And in fact, I can tell you, the more you grow, the older you get, the more value you provide, the higher your compensation is. Drew, do you know how much you got paid at your first job? You know what your hourly rate was?
Well, I'll take the paper route out of that.
Yeah, take that out. Sure.
So I worked at a Roy Rogers fast food restaurant, and I think I made, now I'm old, 61.
Back when dinosaurs roamed the earth.
No, we extincted them a year before. But I think it was $2.85 an hour.
Yeah. So can you imagine if that's what you lived at the rest of your life? Obviously, that wouldn't have worked. But you became more valuable. You got more training.
I remember.
You eventually ran a gas station, convenience store for a while. And then you became a pastor and you made even less. And then you
made even less, exactly.
and then you came and you worked here, right? And you're doing okay.
I'm doing okay.
Because you're creating more value. Notice that your income bracket is transitory.
Yes.
You move through the income brackets throughout your life. And Thomas Sowell really helps call these statisticians and these people doing all this analysis to task for saying, just assuming that everyone's static. No, you're not. You are not making the same thing you made 5 years ago, and you're not making today what you're likely going to make in 5 years. The reality is incomes change, people grow, they become more valuable. So I think that's one of the key benefits of Thomas Sowell. That and thinking beyond first order effects to second, third, fourth order effects. Thomas Sowell is an absolute American treasure. And if from an economic, from a taxation perspective, from a social justice and equality perspective, he has such tremendous insights. He's in his 80s today, 80s or 90s actually. He was a Marine, served in the Korean War, has a PhD from the University of Chicago, and has been writing stuff for a super long time, super helpful. And I thank the Lord for guys like Thomas Sowell. It's good fodder for discussion and great addition to our national dialogue and discussion. We would be a poor nation without guys like Thomas Sowell who can stand on the shoulders of other men like Henry Hazlitt and like all the rest to really help build up what we understand for capitalistic free market economics that reflects the biblical reality, the biblical worldview that we have been provided with through the Word of God. Capitalism, the stuff that Sowell talks about, Henry Hazlitt and all the rest, they most closely reflect the biblical worldview than anything else I've ever seen.
Well, thank you for joining us this week on the podcast. If anything, the last 4 weeks have encouraged me to think more critically, to not take everything that I hear from news pundits or politicians at face value, because remember, they're trying to sell you something, and to remember that the more resources we can get back under our control as stewards of what God has entrusted to us, the better off we're going to be, the better impact we'll have in our own families, and the more generous we can be to the kingdom of God. All that being said, take care, God bless, and remember, think critically and seek wisdom. We'll see you next week. Thanks for joining us on the Stewardology Podcast, where financial stewardship and theology meet. We'd like to help you take your next steps in biblical financial stewardship. Subscribe in your podcast provider to get the newest episode delivered to you every week. Leave a 5-star rating and review to help new listeners find the show. Take advantage of your free personal stewardship review at stewardologypodcast.com/review. Be sure to follow us on social media and visit our website at stewardologypodcast.com for tons of free resources and hundreds of free episodes. You can also leave episode ideas at stewardologypodcast.com/idea. Remember, Psalm 20, verse 7, some trust in chariots and some trust in horses, but we trust in the name of the Lord our God. See you next week.